In the grand palace of Zethar, beneath the gleaming spires of its towering architecture, a gathering of the most powerful beings in the galaxy filled the air with tension. The event was supposed to be a moment of pride for the ruling princess of Zethar, Rylena, a proud and powerful alien princess whose beauty and might were renowned across the stars. Today, however, her pride would be challenged by an unexpected guest, a human warrior. The human stood in the center of the grand hall, his armor worn, battle-scarred, and not as polished as the sleek, advanced designs of the Zetharian soldiers around him. His name was Liam, a warrior from Earth, brought to this alien world by an unusual request. The princess had summoned him for reasons unknown to him, but what he did not expect was the mocking gaze of Rylena herself. Rylena, standing high on her golden throne, watched Liam with a look of utter disdain. She didn't even bother to hide her amusement as she scanned him from head to toe. "Is this the best that Earth has to offer?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, as laughter rippled through the room. The guests, a mix of Zetharian officials and dignitaries, followed her lead, chuckling under their breath. Liam stood tall but couldn't help but feel the weight of the eyes upon him. He had expected respect. After all, he was here as an emissary for Earth, a warrior representing his planet in front of a foreign power. But nothing in his training had prepared him for the stinging mockery of a princess who believed herself to be invincible. "You wear this ancient, rusted armor as if it could protect you from anything," Rylena continued, her voice rising in volume, ensuring that everyone in the room could hear her words. "Look at it. What good is this?" She gestured toward Liam's battered suit. The armor was indeed far from the cutting-edge technology of the Zetharian warriors, made from materials long obsolete in this alien society. But it had been good enough to defend him against countless enemies on Earth. Liam could feel the princess's eyes boring into him. She had made it clear he was beneath her, and she wasn't even pretending to hide it. His armor was not just old, it was a symbol of his place in this foreign world, the lowest of the low, a simple, primitive human who somehow thought he could stand among the elite of the galaxy. The tension in the room mounted as Rylena stood, her eyes narrowing in amusement. "You must be quite the joke on your planet, human. To think, they sent you here to represent them." She paused for dramatic effect, taking a step forward, and gazing down at him. "Perhaps you should have stayed on Earth where your kind can continue to live in ignorance." Her words echoed through the hall, cutting through the silence that had followed her insult. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. Some of the Zetharian officials exchanged glances, unsure whether to join in her ridicule or remain neutral. But Rylena was in control, and they knew better than to cross her. Her beauty, her power, and her royal status meant that she could do whatever she wanted, and no one would dare to oppose her. But Liam refused to bow his head, though the mockery burned through him. He was a warrior, not just some insignificant pawn in her game. He had fought for everything he had. His armor, despite its outdated design, had been forged in the fires of countless battles. It was a symbol of resilience, not weakness. And though the princess may have mocked his appearance, he knew there was more to him than she could ever imagine. The more she mocked him, the more determined he became. He would not show weakness in front of her or anyone else. His armor may have been old, but it had protected him when nothing else could. And just because he wasn't wearing some shiny, advanced suit of armor didn't mean he lacked strength. He was far from powerless. But in that moment, as Rylena continued to laugh at him, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. All that mattered was the fire inside him, the fire that would not be extinguished by her words. The laughter continued to echo around the hall, and the princess leaned back in her seat, clearly enjoying the humiliation she had caused. But what she didn't know was that with every laugh, with every sarcastic remark, she was unknowingly feeding the very fire that would soon bring her to her knees. Rylena's mockery was not just an insult to his armor, it was an insult to him as a person. But in the deepest part of Liam's heart, something stirred. He would not allow this moment to define him. He would not be the joke she thought he was. and as the room's laughter began to die down, he made a silent vow. He would show her that beneath his battered armor there was a strength that no alien princess could ever truly comprehend. As the mocking laughter of the princess and her court died down, a heavy silence fell over the grand hall. Liam, the human warrior, stood in the center of the room, his eyes fixed ahead, not allowing the sting of ridicule to show on his face. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a deep, simmering resolve. Rylena may have thought she had won, but she was wrong. He had endured worse insults before. This moment, this humiliation, would not define him. The princess, still perched on her golden throne, gazed down at Liam with an air of superiority. Her smirk remained in place as she continued to stand tall, confident in her royal power. "Well, what will you do now, human?" she taunted, her voice dripping with arrogance. "You've made your entrance. Your pathetic armor has already proven its worth, or lack thereof. Will you beg for mercy next, or do you have something else to offer?" Her words were like venom, meant to make Liam cower, to break his spirit. But he wasn't broken. He wasn't afraid of her words. He was no stranger to adversity. He had come to this alien world with a mission, one that he would not abandon. The ridicule would not deter him. In that moment, as the princess continued to mock him, a decision was made. Liam slowly reached for the straps on his chest, his fingers working carefully but methodically. The eyes of every Zetharian official were locked on him now. They had all been watching the scene unfold with amusement, but something in the warrior's demeanor began to shift. His stance became more determined, his movements more deliberate. His silence spoke volumes. This was not the same man who had stood quietly under Rylena's mockery. No, this was a man about to reveal something far greater. Rylena's laughter faltered for a split second as she watched him begin to remove his armor. Her brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone tinged with disbelief. "Are you surrendering? Or is this some sort of pathetic attempt to show me your power?" She almost seemed to enjoy the thought that his vulnerability was now his only option. Liam didn't respond. His focus remained on the task at hand. He unbuckled the last strap holding the heavy chest plate in place and removed it slowly, letting it fall to the floor with a dull thud. The room was still, completely still. The princess's eyes widened in disbelief. She had expected him to react with fear, to beg for mercy. But now, as he stripped away the armor that had been a source of ridicule, she realized something. There was no fear in his actions. Liam stood before her now, shirtless, with only his tattered, worn clothing beneath the armor. But beneath those clothes, he was not the frail, weak human she had assumed. His muscles were toned, his body strong from years of battle, of training, and of survival. But it wasn't just his physicality that had changed the mood in the room. It was the sheer confidence that radiated from him. The alien princess had underestimated him from the start, but now she began to feel a shift in the atmosphere. What she had thought was a sign of weakness, the removal of his armor, had, in fact, revealed the opposite. He was not surrendering. He was challenging her. He was showing her that his strength did not come from its appearance or the armor he wore. It came from something deeper, something far more powerful. For a moment, Rylena hesitated. The crowd could sense it. The princess, who had been so sure of herself, was now unsure. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder as they exchanged confused glances. Had they been wrong in their judgment of this human warrior? The princess blinked, trying to regain her composure. "You think this display will intimidate me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You think removing your armor somehow changes your worth?" But deep down, she felt a flicker of unease. She had expected to control this moment, to be the one in power. And yet, the human before her had taken control of the situation, without even lifting a finger in anger. Liam didn't answer her. Instead, he took a deep breath and began to walk slowly toward her. The tension in the room mounted. The Zetharian officials were no longer laughing. The princess, once confident and untouchable, now felt the pressure building. She had been mocking him for his lack of armor, but what had he revealed in its place? Strength, confidence, determination. These were the traits of a warrior who could not be easily broken. The audience watched in silence, every eye trained on the human warrior as he moved forward with purpose. And then, when he was within a few paces of the throne, he stopped. His gaze was unwavering, his posture proud. He had nothing left to prove. The armor may have been removed, but it no longer mattered. It was clear. He was more powerful than anyone had given him credit for. Relina's voice wavered for the first time. You're not what I thought you were, she muttered, almost as if speaking to herself. Her confidence had been shattered, her sense of superiority now replaced by a creeping doubt. The audience, too, began to feel the change. What was once a scene of mockery and ridicule was now a moment of quiet tension. The warrior had not only removed his armor, he had removed the princess's arrogance, piece by piece. And as the princess stood frozen in place, her mocking laughter now replaced by uncertainty, Liam stood tall and silent, knowing that the true challenge was just beginning. The silence in the grand hall was deafening. The air seemed to thicken with every breath, each one taken with the weight of anticipation. The Zetharian officials, once confident in their princess's superiority, were now unsure of what to expect. The human warrior, who had been nothing more than a source of amusement just moments ago, now stood before them, unarmed and unprotected, yet his presence was anything but weak. Liam stood still, his muscles rippling under the light as the princess, Relina, and the entire court watched him with bated breath. There was no fear in his eyes, only a calm, collected determination. He had removed his armor, but the true strength he possessed lay not in the suit that had shielded his body, but in the power that flowed through his veins, the will that had carried him through countless battles, and the spirit that refused to back down. Relina's face, once filled with contempt, was now painted with uncertainty. She could feel something shifting, something she hadn't anticipated. Her eyes narrowed as she tried to read the human before her, trying to gauge what this move meant. "What are you trying to prove, human?" she asked, her voice colder than before. Her attempt to regain control, to regain the upper hand, was slipping. But Liam didn't speak. He simply raised his arms, the movement deliberate and slow, as if preparing to unleash something great. The princess and her court held their breath. They had already seen what his body could do, his strength, his resilience, but they had no idea what was coming next. The first sign of his power came from the ground beneath their feet. A soft rumble, almost imperceptible, began to vibrate the floor. It was subtle at first, like the warning of a storm in the distance. The princess looked down, confusion crossing her face. What was happening? Was this some kind of trick? But then, the rumble grew louder, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise. The Zetharian officials exchanged nervous glances, and the once confident princess took a small step back, her gaze flickering nervously from Liam to the growing energy surrounding him. The vibrations beneath them intensified, and suddenly, the very air seemed to hum with a strange energy. It was as if the room itself was responding to him, to his presence. Then, with a sudden burst, the energy exploded outward, filling the room with an overwhelming power. A shockwave, invisible yet tangible, emanated from Liam, knocking the Zetharian officials back, causing them to stumble and gasp for air. The light in the room flickered, and the temperature soared as if the warrior had tapped into some hidden force of nature. The walls themselves seemed to tremble under the force of it. Relina stood frozen, her eyes wide in shock. She had never experienced anything like this. The human warrior, who had seemed so ordinary, so insignificant just moments ago, was now radiating a power that shook the very foundation of her palace. Liam's hands clenched into fists, and the air crackled with energy. He raised his gaze to meet the princess's eyes. His voice, though calm, carried an authority that filled the room. "This is the power you mocked," he said, his voice echoing with a newfound strength. "This is the strength that lies beneath the surface. You failed to see it, but it has always been there." Raylina swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She had underestimated him. She had mocked his armor, his appearance, and now she was faced with something far more terrifying than any weapon or armor. The warrior before her was not just strong in body. He was powerful in ways she could not understand. His very presence was a force of nature, bending reality to his will. The energy emanating from him felt almost supernatural, like a force beyond her comprehension. The shockwave continued to pulse, growing stronger with each second. It wasn't just physical power. It was something deeper, something primal. Liam's body seemed to radiate a brilliance, an aura of pure strength that made the princess feel small in comparison. The once proud Zetharian princess, who had ruled her people with grace and power, now felt the weight of her arrogance press down on her. She had never faced anything like this before. She tried to gather her composure, her usual confidence returning, though it was shaky. "This is some kind of trick," Raylina said, her voice unsteady. But even as she spoke, she could feel the truth in his words. The power he had unleashed wasn't just a trick. It was real. And it was terrifying. Liam's eyes narrowed as he took a step forward. The energy around him pulsed with each movement, as if the very air bent to his will. "No trick," he said softly. "This is what you failed to see. This is why you should never underestimate those you deem weak." With each word, the power in the room grew, filling every corner with a force so immense that even the walls seemed to groan under its weight. The princess felt herself falter, her mind racing to understand how this human had become so strong, so powerful. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a force that could bend the world itself. The princess's knees buckled for a moment, but she caught herself, standing tall once again. But the doubt was there now, creeping into her mind. She had thought she was the most powerful being in the room, the one who controlled everything. But now, she saw the human before her not just as a warrior, but as something far greater, a force that she could not control and perhaps never could. The room was still, the air thick with the tension of the moment. Raylina stood there, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The human had unleashed something far beyond what she had ever anticipated. He had shattered her expectations and left her questioning everything she had believed. The tables had turned, and now she had to face the true power of the one she had mocked. And Liam. He stood strong, the room still buzzing with the energy he had unleashed. This was just the beginning. The princess had no idea what else he was capable of. The room was now shrouded in a heavy silence, thick with the lingering energy from the explosion of power Liam had just unleashed. The air itself seemed to tremble, vibrating with the force of his power. Every eye in the room was fixed on him, the human warrior who had stood before the alien princess, unshaken by her mockery, and who had now revealed the true depth of his strength. Liam stood tall, his chest rising and falling with each measured breath. The energy around him had not dissipated. It hung in the air, a quiet reminder of the power he had tapped into. His gaze remained locked on Raylina, the Zetharian princess, whose once confident and mocking expression had now transformed into one of awe and uncertainty. She stood motionless, her regal posture faltering as the realization of her own vulnerability began to sink in. For the first time since the beginning of their encounter, Raylina felt something she had never experienced before: humility. The mighty princess who had ruled with an iron fist, who had been worshipped by her people, now found herself standing before a mere human who had taken her power and crushed it with ease. She had mocked him, laughed at his armor, belittled him in front of her court, and yet he had not only survived her insults, but had turned them into the very source of his strength. Her mouth was dry, her mind racing to comprehend the transformation that had just taken place. How had he done this? How had a mere human, someone she had deemed beneath her, come to wield such power? It was as though the entire universe had shifted in the span of a few moments. She had seen his armor fall, his strength revealed. But this was something beyond comprehension. Liam's voice broke through the stillness, calm and unwavering. You mocked me for my armor, for my appearance. You thought I was weak. But strength is not about what you wear or how you look. It's about what you carry inside, what you choose to believe in, even when the world mocks you. His words resonated in the silence, every syllable cutting through the tension like a blade. You underestimated me because you couldn't see the heart of a warrior. And that, Princess Raylina, is where true power lies. The room remained deathly quiet. The Zetharian officials, who had once laughed at the human's appearance, now stood frozen, unsure of how to react. Many had never seen a display of power so raw, so undeniable. And in that silence, the weight of Liam's words hung heavy in the air. The princess, the one who had been so sure of her place in the universe, now found herself questioning everything she had believed. Raylina, unable to meet his gaze, took a step back. For the first time in her life, she felt small. The warrior before her had not only stripped away her arrogance, but had also shown her that true power came not from birthright or physical appearance, but from within. The very thing she had always dismissed as weakness. Liam saw the shift in her eyes, the flicker of vulnerability that she couldn't hide, no matter how hard she tried. He knew this was his moment. This was the resolution he had sought. The moment when his strength would not just be recognized, but respected. He didn't need to fight or prove anything further. His actions had already spoken louder than any weapon or armor ever could. Do you understand now? Liam asked softly, his voice steady but full of conviction. The power you sought to control, the strength you mocked, was never meant to be bent to your will. It was always mine to wield. His gaze softened, no longer filled with the anger that had fueled his earlier resolve, but with the calm assurance of someone who had earned the right to stand tall. You wanted to break me. Instead, you've learned that I can't be broken. Raylina's eyes, wide with shock, slowly filled with something else. Respect. It was fleeting, but it was there. She had never seen anything like this before. She, the princess of a mighty empire, the daughter of a royal line that had never known defeat, was now standing before a human who had just taught her the most important lesson of all. Strength was not defined by birthright or power, but by will, by heart, and by conviction. I see now, Raylina whispered, her voice barely audible. I have misjudged you. You are not like the others. You are not just a warrior. You are something more. The words felt like a weight being lifted from Liam's shoulders. He had not sought revenge, nor had he sought to humiliate her. He had simply wanted to show her that true strength came from within. The battle was not about who could win or who could mock the other, but about realizing that every person, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, had something powerful inside them. Raylina finally took a step forward, her head bowed in acknowledgement. It was a gesture of respect, one that she had never shown to anyone, let alone a human. She had been wrong, and for the first time, she was willing to admit it. You have earned my respect, warrior, she said, her voice now calm and sincere. I see now that I was the one who was weak. I allowed my arrogance to blind me. Liam nodded, his eyes softening. We all have our moments of weakness. The important thing is what we do with them. The princess took another breath, and for the first time since their encounter began, she smiled. A small, genuine smile, one that spoke volumes of the respect she had earned through her own humility. Thank you, she whispered. The room, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now held a quiet sense of resolution. The Zetharian officials, though still in awe, began to nod in acknowledgement. They had witnessed a transformation, not just in the warrior, but in their own princess. And in that moment, they all understood. The true power of a leader was not in their ability to dominate, but in their willingness to grow, to learn, and to embrace their own humanity. Liam, his mission complete, turned to leave the hall. The princess's respect was all the reward he needed. The battle had been won, not through force, but through the strength of his spirit. And as he walked away, he knew one thing for certain. He had shown not just the princess, but everyone in that room, what it truly meant to be a warrior.